When the one day I found myself in here sitting after church talking with Joan Bowen, and I made a mistake. I shared part of my life with her. It's good to share. At least it gives some release. But Joan talks to her husband. I never do this. I have to tell you, I never do this. So you have to pray for me, because this involves betrayal. And betrayal is very personal. It comes from somebody whom either you love or you love and they love you at some point. God does have a plan for us. And his plan never, ever involves our pain or heartache. But he does know in the world in which we live, it will come. Because he must let us learn how great the power of sin is, and how destructive it is, how painful it is, so that when this experiment of Satan's is all finished, will never be a temptation, because his ambassadors will be happy and peaceful and joyful in heaven. But there will be something there that remembers the pain. Not that it'll be painful, but so in order to get through this, I'm going to tell you the end first, okay? Oh, please. Can you hear me? Okay. At the end of all of this, today, right in this presence, the people involved in this, the ones that had left the Lord, in anger and in just a selfishness to do what they wanted to do. Those who had, from their youth, as soon as they left home, had gone away from the Lord and his message, although they still knew it. And those that were Christians, but well, we'll say it that way. Almost all these people walk with the Lord now. Was it worth the pain? Yes, it was worth the pain. So I prayed when the Lord asked me to do this, that my daughter would, I never told her I was going to do this, I asked that they would, her and her husband, to have something, place that needed to go. And they have bought a sailboat lately, so they have a long weekend, so they went sailing. I told her before she left yesterday that I had prayed for her to go. She hadn't read the bulletin or anything, and she had no idea I was doing this. But this would be very painful for her. When this transpired, she was a small child, 6. And she has a very sensitive nature. So So he sent her away. They have found a nice church close to the marina. So go to church, and then they go and they sail. And brings them closer to God. But I want to read something to you because I did really appreciate the music this morning, because you don't get through a crucible without music. Let me tell you. God created music for us to praise Him, but also for us to be able to endure the things that come. I have to tell you, one of my favorite books of the Bible is Ezekiel. I know that's not normal, but very rarely has anybody called me normal. So I'm going to try and read this. And I picked this because I had to keep reminding myself how great God is. And nothing explains that greater than the first chapter of Ezekiel. This is from the Holman's translation. I looked, and there was a whirlwind coming from the north, a great cloud with fire flashing back and forth, and brilliant light all around it. In the center of the fire there was a gleam like amber. The form of 4 living creatures came from it, and this was their appearance. They had human form, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the hooves of a calf, sparkling like gleam of polished brass. They had human hands under their wings, on their 4 sides. All around them had faces and wings. Their wings were touching. The creatures did not turn as they moved. Each one went straight ahead. The form of each of their faces was that of a man, and each of the 4 had the face of a lion on the right, the face of an ox on the left, and the face of an eagle. That is what their faces were like. Their wings were spread upward. Each had 2 wings, touching that of another, and 2 wings covering its body. Each creature went straight ahead. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went without turning as they moved. The form of the living creature was like the appearance of burning coals of fire and torches. Fire was moving back and forth between the living creatures. It was bright, with lightning coming out of it. The creatures were darting back and forth with flashes of lightning. When I looked at the living creatures, there was 1 wheel on the ground beside it, each creature that had 4 faces. The appearance of the wheels and their craftsmanship was like the gleam of a beryl, and all 4 had the same form. Their appearance and their craftsmanship was like a wheel within a wheel. When they moved, they went in any of the 4 different directions without pivoting as they moved. Their rims were large and frightening. Each of their 4 rims were full of eyes all around. So when the living creatures moved, they were moved beside them. And when the creatures rose from the earth, the wheels also rose. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, the creatures went in the direction the Spirit was moving. The wheels rose alongside them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved. When the creatures stood still, the wheels stood still. When the creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose alongside them. For the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. The shape of the expanse, with the gleam like awe-inspiring crystals, was spread out over the head of the living creatures. And under the expanse their wings extended one toward another. Each of them had 2 wings covering their bodies. When they moved, I heard the sound of their wings like the roar of mighty water, like the voice of the Almighty, and a sound of commotion, like the noise of an army. When they stood still, they lowered their wings. A voice from above the expanse over their heads, when they stood still, the lowering and lowered their wings. The shape of a throne with the appearance of sapphire stone was above the expanse. There was a form with the appearance of a human on the throne, high above. From what seemed to be his waist up, I saw a gleam like amber, with what looked like fire enclosing it all around. From what seemed to be his waist down, I also saw what looked like fire. There was a brilliant light all around him. The appearance of the brilliant light all around was like that of a rainbow, and in a cloud on a rainy day. This was the appearance of the form of the Lord's glory. When I saw it, I fell face down and heard a voice speaking. Does anybody understand most of that? I can't tell you how many times I've read it and how many different translations I've read it in. I don't understand it much more now than I did then. Except I have learned this is a representation of the fact that the Lord knows everything in this world and is in complete control of it all. All of that stuff, all of those angels, all the light, all the glory is a representation of God's eternal presence, of his total control. Nothing happens in this world that he does not allow. But it also means he is in control of it. It will only allow it to go as far as he will allow it to go. So that means whatever, if we are in his care, whatever crucible he allows us to be caught up in, he knows how far he can let it go. Crucibles burn away the impurities. That's what they're for. They make metals pure and worth a whole lot more money. So I guess crucibles make us worth more. But it is hot inside the crucible, and he knows it. So whatever crucible anybody is in, it is painful. It will have its work, but you will not feel the work or see the work until it is finished. And we need to pray for each other continuously, because every one of you have gone through your own crucibles. We all will and have. And as I have learned, some of us need a few more crucibles than others. My second husband was a very gentle soul. And when he died at the very young age of 56, I said, Lord, why didn't you take me? Leave me. I prayed that the Lord would take me instead of Kenneth. I will tell you, the answer I think I got from the Lord is Kenneth was ready to be laid to sleep. I wasn't quite ready. I needed another crucible or two. So, but he was the joy of my life. And the Lord brought him into my life in a marvelous, miraculous way. We had known each other in high school when we both lived in Fort Worth, Texas. And we had become friends. He was my boyfriend. I was his girlfriend. And then we graduated from high school and we went our separate ways. He joined the Air Force and I went off to college. We seem to stay together in a setting, don't we, in our friendships. But him I never saw again for 20 years. But when I married a young man who was not an Adventist. He became an Adventist. And we had a very good marriage. We have 2 children that had a boy, and then 5 years later I had Jennifer. They are wonderful children. There came a time in our marriage that for some reason, I don't know all the reasons, I don't want to know all the reasons, I don't need to. He decided he was unhappy and he wanted other friends. And our marriage ended in divorce. In a great deal of pain, because I kept trying to save this marriage, because that's what we're supposed to do. And we went on for over a year where he would leave, and then he would come back. And he would leave, and then he would come back. But it was one day the Lord opened my eyes to the fact that this was destroying my children. And God gave that when he said to Moses that he gave a decree of divorce because of the hardness of your heart. He allowed Satan to come in and his heart grew so hard. And one time when he left, Jennifer said, "Mommy, my heart can't stand anymore." And I realized that my son, who was just turning 12, who was always sweet and loving and gentle and kind, unless his father came home, whenever his father would come home. And he didn't want to be there because he couldn't go and do the things he wanted to do. He had ceased to be the loving husband, and he was verbally abusive. And one morning when I woke up, and I know it was the Lord opening my eyes, I realized that when his father was home, my son treated me like he treated me. I realized I was teaching my son to treat his future wife like I was being treated. I was ruining him. My daughter, I had no idea what was going to happen to her because she was sick all the time, and they couldn't find the reason. I think it was a broken heart. But I knew I had to do something, and I knew the Lord put that in the Bible for us, that because of the hardness of your hearts, I've given a decree of divorce. Now, in the world we live in today, it can go either way. It's not just men that have hard hearts. Women do too. But I knew I had to do this. So I told him we needed to file for divorce. And I told him he needed to file it because I had no money. I had a really, really good job that I made a good living on my own. I knew I could manage. But as it went on, the place where I worked, we all three had worked at one time. Him and me and his friend. Well, he left and went and got a job someplace else. But me and his friend was still there. By the time that he was filing for divorce, I weighed 97 pounds. And I knew I had to do something. To keep going to that place to work was too painful. It never healed. So I quit. But then I had to. And I got some jobs cleaning from some businesses. I lived in Keene, Texas. We're not talking about a big metropolis. I kind of was lost and I didn't really know what I was going to do. But you know what? I did not have any fear. The Lord just let me go along and He took care of me. I don't really know how we managed that long because there was no way there was enough money. Now, their daddy did pay child support, and he did that, and he was very faithful. Even in all this, he always provided for the children. But I just gave it all to the Lord and asked. And one night when it was the summer, and Doug and Jennifer were gone to their grandparents in Illinois. And got a call in the middle of the night. They were looking for my husband. This was before he had left permanently. And they said they needed him in. He was the foreman of a plant. And I said, he's not here. And it was midnight. Well, I hung up the phone. We didn't have cell phones, so I couldn't contact him. But I'm not stupid either. He wasn't at work late, and he wasn't at home. So I confronted him that. So anyway, when I discovered that, I just got up and got dressed because I knew where he was. I debated about what I tell and what I don't. But I went and I confronted because he was where I figured he was. And I just told him he needed to come home because we needed to talk. So he did. And it was late at night and we talked out. And I told him, after we had talked quite a bit, I told him, I said, you need to leave tonight. He was getting up to go in and go to bed, and I said, no, you need to leave tonight. And he turned and looked at me, and he said, I don't want to leave you like this. There was still some compassion, I suppose. And that's when I told him, I'm never alone. God is always with me. And that's when I felt a hand go around my neck and lay on my shoulder. If one of you put your hand on my shoulder, it would be no more real than that hand was. And I knew in that moment God had allowed me to have the comfort of my angel. So I just kept walking in faith. So he was going to file for divorce. And a few days later, I went to stop and get gas. And Keene was a little place. And I'd lived in that area most of my life. I went into the little store, and to pay for it, and there was the sister-in-law of Kenneth. And I said, oh. I said, how is Kenneth? I introduced myself, and she said, oh, I remember you. And I said, how is Kenneth? Where is he at? She said, oh, he's in the Air Force still, and he's in Wyoming, but he's getting ready to go to Germany. And so I said, well, just tell him hi for me. And she said, and we had talked, and she said, you should write to him. He's divorced. You should write to him. And I went home, and I thought, Lord, should I write to him? And I said, no, Lord. With everything I've been through, if you want him in my life, you put him here. But I also knew he was on his way to Germany. He had the orders, so he would be leaving pretty soon. Because I grew up in an Air Force family. I know how it works. So several months later, I was back in there for something, and I was talking to his sister-in-law, and I said, so is he enjoying Germany? And she said, he hasn't gone. She said the Air Force finally had the ability to do his surgery on his eyes. He had one eye that a stick was stuck, poked in it when he was a child, and the vision in it was just about gone. And the Air Force had told him, oh, wait, we'll take you down to Denver and do surgery, and your eye will be fine. And but he wanted that place in Germany. It was in Bavaria, and it was a good place to go. And he wanted it, so he talked to him about maybe not doing the surgery so he could take that order. And they said, they talked to the commander in Germany, and he said, I'll wait for him. He's got really good references. I want him as my first sergeant. And this Air Force wasn't even on an Air Force base. It was these people were stationed on a German Air Force base. And so she said, you should write to him. And I still said, no, Lord, if you want him in my life, you put him here. So after the divorce was over, I got a phone call one night, 10 o'clock. And it was Nelma. And she said, guess who's in town? I thought, this cannot be. The Air Force does not work like this. The government of the United States of America is not this flexible. And I said, is Kenneth here? And she said, he's here. He's up at the store with Benny to help talking to him while he's closing up. She said, you should call him. Oh, I said, well, just call Benny and tell him to work a little slower. Maybe I'll just drive up there. So I woke Douglas up. He was 12. He was thrilled because I was going to let him watch a little TV. I said, you get up, Jennifer's asleep, and I'm going to go see somebody for a little bit. And I went. It was a very small town, let me tell you, we did. And it was almost all Adventist, so I knew he was safe. He was thrilled. So I went up, and I walked in, and there sat Kenneth. And he was going to be in town for just a very short time because he was going on to see his parents in Tennessee before he left. But we spent some time talking together. And the next morning he called me because I was working for myself, so if I needed to put something off a little later, I could. But he called me, and we talked, and so we had, his brother, when he got up that morning, his brother was on the phone with his mother, telling her, Kenneth's not coming right now. He's going to spend a few more days here. And his mother really, Kenneth was her favorite. He was much younger than the rest of them. She did not want, but Benny was also her favorite. And he said, no, Mom, he's staying here for a few more days. And we had some time to be together. Then when he went to Tennessee to be with his parents for 2 weeks before he went over, his parents were much older, and he knew his father would probably not survive. It was a 4-year tour. His father would not still be alive when he came home, so he wanted to spend some time. But it was fall, and I went to Tennessee and spent some time with them. And in this short period of time, Kenneth wanted to marry me. And I thought, this hasn't been very long. And I thought, he would not be here if God had not put him here, because he should not be here. So I said, okay, I'll marry you. We'll go to Europe. But he had to go on. So we set our wedding in the summer. But he got to Germany, and his commander said, first sergeants and commanders work very closely together. When his commander realized that he was planning on coming back to Texas to get married in the summer, his commander said, oh no, you just got to go and marry that girl right now, because we're having a very big inspection. It's in the summertime, and I need my first sergeant. You got to be here. So you just go back. I'll give you 30 days. You go back and get her and bring her here. So I hadn't started getting birth certificates together. My son was born in New Mexico. My daughter was born in Illinois, and I was born in Florida. And he was there. He called me. He said, I'm getting on a plane. I'm coming. We're going to get married. I don't know how we're going to go with you, but the Lord took care of all of that. Benny, his brother, had a salesman in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I said, I'll just go and get that birth certificate. This was in the day and age you could do that. So he went and got Doug's birth certificate and mailed it and said, oh, it's just a wedding gift for them. No problem. I had people in Illinois who wound up, an ex-sister-in-law, as a matter of fact, who went and picked up Jennifer's birth certificate. Because in those days, we didn't get birth certificates when kids were born. We didn't realize that because we didn't travel like we travel nowadays, and we certainly wasn't planning on going to Germany. But then mine was a little bit harder because I was born in Florida and only lived there 3 weeks because it was at the end of the war, and my daddy was getting out of the army, and they had to wait for me to be born and get big enough to drive a car all the way back to Texas. So we knew nobody in St. Petersburg. So we had to send for that one by registered mail. But Kenneth was so wonderful. I had never experienced this before. He did all this stuff. I didn't have to do it. It was a new experience for me. So while we were waiting for mine, we went and got our ID cards from the military, made arrangements and everything, but mine still hadn't come. And I would tease him. I'd say, you guys, you just take the kids and go on, and then I'll come. He didn't want to go like that. But one day, there it was. So then we were just at the end of the world where you had to get your passports through the post office. 6 weeks at the very least. And it's usually 2 months, they said. 3 months. But he had heard that you could go down to Houston and get a passport in a day. And they'd send it to you, and it'd just take you a couple of days. But we'd go to you had to get the paperwork first and fill it out. And we couldn't go to the post office and get the paper and fill it out because they wouldn't let us take it away. And one morning I woke up, And Kenneth was on the phone to the State Department, trying to figure out how to get passports to take his family. And they said, well, just come here and we'll do it in 24 hours. If you got all the paperwork and all the pictures and all the information, we bring it in the morning and it'll be ready by 5 o'clock. So we went, when we left, we drove across country so we could see his parents one more time, made a stop in Tennessee. And then we drove on to Washington, D.C., and put our paperwork in, had a wonderful day sightseeing, picked up our paperwork, drove on up, and let his one daughter, his youngest daughter who was going with us, to visit her grandparents for a day, and we saw around just south of New York City. And then we picked her up the next day and went to New York City and got on a plane for Germany. In all of during my time of trouble, my mother was living in that area, and I took care of her. My brothers lived down in Houston. During this time, I had to have some minor surgery. And somehow or other, the doctors had not taken into consideration that I weighed 97 pounds. And I had heard because one of my son's friend, his mother was a surgical nurse. And she came to see me when I came home, and she said, "You scared the devil out of us." I knew nothing about this. I knew that this was supposed to be a day surgery, and I was supposed to be home. Well, I woke up in the hospital in the middle of the night. But nobody was there. I had no idea why I was there. But she said, "You scared us to death." Because we could not get your body temperature up. We wrapped you in as many hot blankets as we could. She said most of the nursing staff stayed and doctors stayed because they couldn't get your blood pressure up, and they could not wake you up. They'd given me too much of the sleeping stuff. And I never woke up in surgery. I woke up in the room in the middle of the night. God preserved my life because I had no hospital bill from that. God saved my life. I went home and I was supposed to take a couple of weeks off from work. And in that time period, my mother had a mild heart attack. But while she was recovering from that, she had two massive strokes. One on her front lobe and one in the back. How she had survived was only because she was in with that heart attack, but how she survived the whole thing, and they had to move her up to a main hospital up in the city, the big hospital. And they were going to have to do surgery to relieve the pressure because there was blood clots and the pressure was kind of... So they planned, and this was happening while all this, my marriage is falling apart. But she survived. There were doctors that came in and nurses. The surgery had to be on Mother's Day, so everybody was off on that Sunday for Mother's Day. They didn't have surgeries planned, but different nurses volunteered to come in, and a doctor volunteered to do the surgery, and she survived. They really didn't give us much hope, but my mother was really tough. And she survived. But her doctor called me and told me, he said, "You have to let us put her in a nursing home because you cannot handle the medications." And I think my mother, he was an Adventist doctor, I think she may have shared with him what was going on in my life, because he said, "You can't take care of her. We can't take her home and take care of her. We need to put her in one, and she had shared with him one that she wanted to. He was an amazing man, a very Christian man. So they put her in a nursing home, but that means I had to clean out her apartment, and I wasn't supposed to lift more than 5 pounds. And I kind of needed to do it on my own. I'm not quite sure how it got accomplished, but it did get accomplished. I have no idea how. And her furniture came to my house, and then I sold it off bit by bit. And then, in the spirit of prophecy, there is a chapter there that talks about when the burdens of a family fall on the shoulders of one person and the other members of the family do not help with the burden, the Lord will intervene and will work a way that he will release that person and send them away so that the others have to help, have to take over. He sent me to Germany, and my brothers had to deal. Because I knew I was supposed to go, because there was no way Kenneth Bowen should have been in Keene, Texas. So I just kept taking a step forward. And I need to back up. I know I'm going over, but you gotta hear this, because this is amazing. In our pain and in our dividing, people can get very cruel who are usually not cruel. And at one point, my husband asked me, would you go away from this place if you could? I said, if I could go, I would go. He said, if you really wanted to go. Not in a kind way did he say this. If you really wanted to go, you would just put what you could put in a suitcase and leave. Get on a bus and leave. He hadn't really thought through that statement because he knew I was going no place without my kids. When we finally were ready to go, each one of us, my son, my daughter, and I, had one suitcase. Sold everything we had. What I couldn't sell, I gave away. Had a house full of furniture. But we took one suitcase, we got on that plane, and we left. We need to be very careful when we've made promises in front of God and pledged our love and our promise to care for each other. When we make that promise, then when we are cruel and unfaithful to those promises, and especially the cruel things that we say, we may end up having to live with those things. Because he never expected me to just take one suitcase for each of us. And he did say to me, do you think I'm just going to let you take my kids to Germany? And I said, if you want to fight this in court, we can. And you may win. But I am going to Germany. And our children are very tired of seeing me cry. He never fought it. The kids came home to see him in the summertime. Sometimes Christmas once in a while, but usually there was never any legal thing that had to be done. It was all, I knew he would send them back because God would put it on his heart. We need to be extremely careful when we make promises and pledges to each other or to others, especially if we call ourselves a Christian. God holds those promises and pledges as sacred. And we do not inflict that pain on the other person without having a price to pay ourselves. But that husband that had left me, he preaches in the Adventist church now. He came back to the Lord. It took 6 years after we came back from Germany, but he preaches. He's a good preacher. He came back and gave his heart to the Lord. Serves the Lord faithfully. Kenneth, who was the light of my life, was a very kind and gentle man. He, of course, as a young man, he had left the church, but he had gotten baptized before we got married. His choice. I never demanded. And there were struggles for him as we went forward in our lives. But when we came to the time that he came down with cancer, we had been married 18 years. And we prayed for his healing. But when he was in the hospital, because he had lung cancer that had metastasized to his bones, and he said, he was in there 2 weeks. We had 6 weeks after we discovered the cancer before he died. But in the 2 weeks, we would talk about heaven. And he would say, tell me again what it will be like when Jesus comes. And when we realized that God was not going to heal him, I asked for mercy, because bone cancer has nothing that relieves pain. And the morning after I had asked for God's mercy, he passed away. He was looking at me and smiling, and then he was gone. But I will see him again. I will share worlds with him again. God is good. There are painful things in this world. But his heart breaks more than ours when he sees us have to endure. So we need to pray for one another, for strength. And never call what somebody is doing wrong, because you have no idea where God's going to lead them. Nobody would have thought I should have married the first husband without demanding that he become a Christian. My mother demanded of him, which I did not know, which made him angry years later at me. Came to realize, because I told him, I said, I can't help it, you never told me that. I didn't demand it of you. We do not understand why God leads. It's not his plan, divorce. Anything in this world, so much of this world, is not God's plan. He has to work with it. Have compassion for one another, because everybody has a crucible. Some are just more noticeable than others. But may God bless you, each one. And know that you are loved greatly by the Lord. And I went to Bavaria with my husband for 4 years. We went from Bavaria, which is one of the most beautiful places on earth, to northern Italy for 3 years. I had a 7-year honeymoon. It was wonderful, ladies. It was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Our closing hymn will be hymn number 656. I didn't plan this. It's entitled, "O Perfect Love," and it happens to be about marriage. Isn't that interesting? I didn't know what Joan was going to talk about today, but this was the hymn that I chose. So let's stand and sing, "O Perfect Love," hymn number 656. We'll sing all three verses. Bow your heads as we close with prayer. God in heaven, I thank you so much for your gift of peace, your presence with us, even unexpected times, that you guide in our life, that you guide in our future, and that we, as we grow with you, trust you more and more with that. I ask that you be with each one of us as we take on this new week. Guide and direct us and bring us back safely next week. In your name, amen.